Hello, welcome back to I Say Our Wrong Reads, and this is Audio Drama Roundup. So this is going to be the first of what I'm going to do roughly every 3 months, or if I listen to a lot of audio dramas a bit more frequently. But I wanted to have something similar to like a book wrap up where I can talk about the audio dramas that I've recently listened to, review them, and maybe get some other people interested in audio dramas. So the last 3 months I've not actually listened to too many, and the ones that I have listened to have been from Big Finish, which is a company that tends to predominantly look at audio dramas from the Doctor Who universe. So let's get into it. So the first audio drama that I listened to in the last 3 months was the special edition release for celebrating 50 years of the Master in Doctor Who, called Masterful. This was a 3-hour long story with all the original cast, so Geoffrey Beevers, Matt Gatiss, Michael Gomez, Derek Jacobi, Alex McQueen, Milo Parker, Eric Roberts, and John Sim, and featuring all of these actors as their character, the Master, or Missy for Michelle Gomez, and was just essentially a wee trip round celebrating the character and the 50 years that they've been portrayed on screen and in other forms of media. I did enjoy the story. There was definitely some pros and cons when going into it for the first time. For example, it was quite difficult for the first hour or so in order to differentiate who exactly was talking, because quite a lot of these actors have a very similar cadence or like voice, so they are all quite like posh English at times. So the ones that weren't posh English were actually a lot easier to tell apart than the ones that were. But I eventually got into the swing of things and got to do it. The story itself was relatively weak, but I don't think that's too important, because I think the thing about these kind of stories, it's all about the inter-character relations and like the development between the incarnations or whatever. And for that alone, I thought this was really good. I did really enjoy it for that part, especially between the Crispy Master, who's played by Beevers, and the Eric Roberts' Master, who was performed in the 1996 TV movie. Other than that, there was also really stellar performances put in by Michelle Gomez, Missy, and Katie Manning for Jo Grant. Those were probably the highlights of this pack. There was other bits that could have dragged it down, and there was some like referencing to other stories that I haven't actually listened to. So I do feel like once I listen to more of like the individual series itself, then there might be like references and things that I'll pick up on later. But for the current time, for what it was, I enjoyed it. Also, I just love the limited edition of this. It's very pretty. So I don't really want to give it like a star rating, because I find it very difficult to give audio dramas stars in the same way I give books, because books I know what I'm looking for, but audio dramas it's just essentially what I'm enjoying at the time. How I'm feeling can impact a story a lot more than it can impact a book for me. Next up is The End of the Beginning. This was the last ever entry in what was now known as the main range. So the main range was one of the biggest staples of Big Finish, and it started back in 1999 with a multi-Doctor story between the 5th, the 6th and the 7th Doctor. This is the last one, the 275th entry in it, and it has the 5th, the 6th, the 7th and the 8th all appearing in it, including their various companions. And it's all full cast once again, and I definitely think at the time I really enjoyed it while I was listening to it. I found that the individual stories themselves were good, if a bit short, because there's 3 stories and then the last story ties it all up together. The individual stories themselves were good, but I did feel that the last one was maybe a bit rushed to try and get everything together, and kind of empty for some of it, and definitely like the Seventh Doctor felt like he was coming in a bit late, almost, that he was just going, ooh, popped in at the very last minute to save everyone. But other than that, I think the performances were excellent. I always like hearing India Fisher as Charlie, specifically because she's my first Big Finish companion for audio dramas, and that's really what got me into it. So yes, although it might not be the best main range ever produced, I think it's solid, and it definitely reminds me of the first one that was ever done, which was The Silence of Time. So then I actually had a couple of re-listens. So I've already listened to these before, but I came back and revisited them now. And I listened to the New Frontiers series from Bernice Summerfield range, which is the fourth series in the second range of Benny audios. So the Benny audios is a bit confusing. I think in total this is like the 14th or the 15th series, I think, in total for her. This one was kind of middle of the road for me. It was middle of the road for me the first time I listened to it, and this time it was the exact same. The premises of the stories were very interesting and could have been developed further, but I do feel like there was like something lacking, especially for the earlier Benny audios and the later ones. This is kind of like a dip between them. So the first one was called A Handful of Dust, and it's essentially Benny and two of her friends, Ruth and Jack, went to a planet just full of dust, and got an SOS call, and they arrived there, and it's essentially them figuring out what happened. And it was good. It was good, but I definitely think there was certainly something missing from the story. That maybe could have been developed a little bit further. It was very stereotypical Benny story, archaeology, that kind of thing, which is enjoyable, and I can find that, but I do think there was something missing. The second one was probably the strongest standalone of the series, and that was the HMS Surprise. So there was a spaceport that used to build ships, and then it was abandoned and nobody knows why, and they essentially are trying to find out what happened. It was really good. The premise was carried out. The voice actor that was guesting in it was very good, and on the whole it was a good character development for both Benny and for Jack in particular, who is definitely growing on me the second time round I'm listening to these. First time I wasn't too sure on him, but now I am. And then the last one was The Curse of Fenman. Now, the thing is with the Benny series, and I might do a video like trying to how to get into the Benny series, because it is a very, very good series and I would highly recommend it, but it can be a bit complicated at times. So the character of April Fenman first appeared, if I'm right, in The Glass Prison, or one of that, which is actually a book, not an audio drama, and she doesn't actually appear in audio drama form until this point, where she's played by Georgia Moffat, who is David Tennant's wife and Peter Davison's daughter. That choppy turning in and out between books and audio dramas was quite common for Benny's series. Even now, I think they only stopped really doing that about 5 years ago. This came out before that. So while it's probably easy for someone who hasn't read the book to pick up on what's going on, it can be a bit confusing because they do reference stuff that happened in that book. Otherwise, again, it just felt kind of lackluster. There's something missing from it, although it was still good, and Georgia Moffat was very good as April Fenman, although that wasn't exactly what I was picturing in my mind. It still works. And then on the next series of Bernice Summerfield, which was Missing Persons, I actually have only re-listened to the first one, which was Big Dig, which I definitely felt like it was getting back into the swing of where I thought Benny was going, so that after the lull it was definitely bringing it back out. And it's essentially they go to this mysterious planet and they unearth, it's all about an archaeology, disturbing things that maybe best left secret. It's a very archaeology heavy story, and it was very fun, and you can definitely feel the atmosphere of the planet around them, and I hopefully should get the rest of this finished by next time. Now, My surprise one that I liked this month has got to be the Master by, well, this was the first in its range, and I don't actually know if there's going to be any more of these, but this was probably my favourite of all of them that I've listened to. I wasn't actually expecting this to be my favourite or expecting it to be brilliant at all. I was just expecting a good, typical Big Finish story to tide me over. But this was the first time, well, not the first time, but one of the biggest time that Eric Roberts has reprised his role as the Master. And I highly enjoyed this one. It really caught me surprise. The first episode was absolutely brilliant, and the second episode wasn't quite as good. But I think that might have been that I never listened to a Vienna story before, because she has her own series as well. So and her character was introduced in the second episode, so I had to get used to her while also trying to listen to the story and what was going on. I do think the first one was really good. The second one was a bit middle of the road, probably what I was more expecting from this set than what I got, and the third one was absolutely amazing. It's quite a typical thing for having Nick Briggs play the Daleks, but he really knocked it out of the park with the Inquisitor Dalek, I think it was called, and the dynamics between the Daleks and the Master, and then you've got Vienna right in the middle of it, was really good. And I definitely think from this point on I'll be checking out more of Vienna's series because of how good that it was. So yes, I highly recommend this one if you're interested in it, because I know quite a lot of people passed it up because they're like, oh, it's just a Master story, what's really into it? But it was probably the best that I've listened to so far. So the best of this month would be Master, and I don't really have a worst of this month because it's very rare that I find a Big Finish audio that I vehemently dislike. Yeah, and think the next one will be a lot bigger because there's big releases coming out in the next couple of months, including Christopher Eccleston's reprising his role as the Ninth Doctor. And also I have got into the McCleavey series, which was published by the BBC, and they are also very good, and it's like a crime Victorian drama set in Edinburgh, and actual Scottish actors, writers, based on a real guy. Great fun. So I can't wait to get to that one. And so I know this is quite different from like books, but it is somewhat related, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you've got any questions or whatever, then leave a comment down below. I will have the link to the Big Finish website down below as well. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.